When people in the European Parliament and the European Commission demand 2% of the GDP for armament expenditures, no, the opposite is necessary. Spend 2% of our GDPs for culture and art, for education, for healthcare, for strengthening the public services.
You just heard from Walter Baier, the lead candidate for the left in the European Parliament. The European Left's manifesto prioritizes peace and human rights, challenging the EU's defense spending and advocating for enhanced rights for refugees as part of their stance against Fortress Europe. But who exactly are the left in the European Parliament? The left in the EP comprises various parties from across the EU, united by their similar left-wing to far-left ideologies. When you vote in the European elections, you're actually voting for national parties, like Die Linke in Germany, Left Bloc in Portugal, or Syriza in Greece. These parties then come together under the banner of the European left. However, the left-wing landscape is quite fragmented. In addition to the European left, there are 4 other European parties sharing left-wing ideologies. And then there are quite a few parties that have no affiliation to any European party, but they do all work together in the European Parliament as part of the left group. The European left is the most notable among these, having released a comprehensive manifesto and even selecting the Spitzenkandidat for the European Parliament elections. Therefore, we'll focus on the European left and their manifesto for the upcoming 2024 EU elections. But before we get into it, let's first take a look at all the national parties that are part of the left group. First, let's add the parties that are members, observers, or partners of the European left. Next, let's add all the other national parties that align to the left in the European Parliament. This means that voting for one of these national parties back home means you're kind of voting for the left's master plan for Europe. To give you an idea of national influence, in today's European Parliament, the biggest national parties that are part of the left are Die Linke from Germany, followed by La France Insoumise, and Podemos from Spain. Since we're diving into all 7 EU political groups, we're all about fairness here. So to help you compare apples to apples, or in this case parties to parties, we're focusing on 6 key areas for each of these videos. First up on our list is defense. It's a biggie, considering everything that's going on in the world. The European left opposes military conflicts and calls for peace. They want an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine and Russian forces to leave. They support sanctions against Russia's military industry, but they are against NATO's growth and an arms race in Europe. The left also criticizes the US military support for Israel, calling for a ceasefire, humanitarian aid, and Israel to withdraw from occupied territories. They support Palestinian rights to live freely, based on 1967 borders. The overarching goal is to prevent Europe from becoming a battleground for a new Cold War. They envision a Europe that ensures its security independently, without reliance on the USA. At the same time, though, they oppose the deployment of new nuclear weapons and champion the creation of nuclear weapon-free zones. Next up is one of the hottest topics in Europe: migration. The left strongly opposes what they describe as Fortress Europe, criticizing it for waging a war against migrants and refugees for decades, causing violence, suffering, and torture, with thousands of victims in the Mediterranean and along the Balkan route. They want to dismantle Frontex, the EU's border security agency, and object to outsourcing detention centers to non-EU countries. Their vision includes the creation of safe, legal, and regular migration routes, alongside enhanced protection, rights, and assistance for migrants and asylum seekers. In addition, they push for increased solidarity among EU member states regarding migrant relocation. The left argues that to limit immigration, the EU needs to foster peace and sustainable growth in regions like the Middle East and Africa, rather than fuel conflicts or exploit resources. Next up is another hotly debated topic in Europe: climate change. Going through the left's manifesto, it felt like I was reading the Greens' plans. The left is really focusing on fighting climate change. They want to bump up the EU's goal for cutting down greenhouse gases to 65% by 2030 and hit climate neutrality by 2035. They advocate for public ownership of essential services like water and energy. In fact, they want to stop public firms from going private. This includes creating a European fund for public services that invest in essential sectors like transport, healthcare, and education. In terms of regulation, they want to control car production so that it is environmentally friendly, ban private flights, prioritize trains, including night trains, and expand public transport networks. Then there's economy. The left prioritizes large-scale investments in green jobs, supporting SMEs, public services, and the healthcare sector. How? Well, they want to free up money, and a lot of it. They want to redirect a large part of the 460 billion euros EU member states spend on their militaries to social initiatives. They also suggest returning energy profits from wars to the public. Their plan also includes ending tax havens in the EU and standardizing some tax rates. They propose changing ECB policies to support green projects with very low interest rates and discourage harmful practices with high rates. For labor, the left proposes a European Basic Income Directive to ensure a minimum income for all, covering essential living costs for a dignified life and the end of unpaid internships. They advocate for equal treatment of migrant workers and propose reducing work hours without cutting pay. Oh, and they want stricter AI regulation. Next on the list, we have social issues.
Start making possible that every European has the right to access freely and easily public services, healthcare, education, public transport. Don't talk, do it.
Well, as you probably guessed, this is where the left wants to spend a whole lot of money. The left wants to make sure everyone in Europe has access to affordable and decent homes. They want to set legal limits on rents, stop unfair evictions, and make sure tenants have stronger rights. They also want to oblige local authorities to provide housing for students. Once again, they're against privatizing education and want only public funding for public schools and research, dedicating a staggering 7% of the EU's GDP to these areas. They're calling for the end of entrance exams and tuition fees for all students, including non-EU and non-European students. And they want to dedicate 2% of the EU's GDP to support cultural activities. Then there's equal work and pay for women, and better pensions. They also support LGBTQIA+ identities and demand strong anti-discrimination measures and hate speech definitions. Now finally, what about EU reform and enlargement? The left advocates for EU reform and amending its treaties to reflect anti-fascist and anti-Nazi values as fundamental principles. They propose empowering the European Parliament with the ability to draft laws, select the European Commission, manage the EU's budget, and supervise the European Central Bank's actions. Although the Parliament doesn't currently have a role in foreign policy decisions, the left opposes any move to eliminate the need for unanimous decisions in the European Council on such matters. Additionally, they stand behind Ireland's desire for reunification. When it comes to enlargement, the manifesto says, and I quote, "The EU has set clear criteria for its enlargement policy, which must not be watered down. States can only become members of the EU if they respect human rights, the rule of law, and the social and political rights of their populations."
We are the ones who want to go forward, who want to achieve a Europe of solidarity, of equality, of justice, of hope, and of togetherness.
And that's an overview of the left's plans. Craving more detail? Then dive into their manifesto linked below for the full rundown. Nonetheless, this should give you a very good overview to start with. This wraps up another video about the European political groups. If you are new to European politics, check out this guide to the EU elections, or check out the EPP, currently the biggest European party. Please subscribe to the channel to get an overview of all 7 political groups. And if you're passionate about helping us spread knowledge on the EU, think about joining our Patreon community. Until next time.